"I never wanted a mail-order bride," Nathan said. "Not yesterday, not today, not ever." She didn't argue. She didn't beg. Amelia Hart stood on that dusty platform with one worn suitcase and tears. She refused to let fall, and she looked at him like a woman who had already survived too much to be destroyed by one more disappointment. Nathan meant to walk away. Instead, he stood there watching her hold herself together with nothing but dignity and sheer will, and felt something crack open in his chest that had been sealed shut for 7 years. A lonely cowboy. A woman with nowhere left to go. And the moment tears touched a heart that had forgotten how to feel. If this story already has your heart, subscribe to our channel and follow along to the very end. Drop a comment and tell us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday. Nathan Cole found it sitting on the kitchen table when he came in from the morning feed, still carrying the smell of cattle and summer grass on his coat. His younger sister Clara was standing near the window with her hands clasped in front of her, wearing the expression she always wore when she had done something she was not entirely sorry for. He picked up the telegram. He read it once. He read it again. "You didn't," he said. "I did," Clara said. "You placed an advertisement." "I placed a very thoughtful advertisement." Nathan set the telegram down on the table with a steadiness that Clara recognized immediately. It was the kind of steadiness that came right before he said something that ended a conversation entirely. "You're going to cancel it," he said. "I can't cancel it, Nathan. She's already on the train." The silence that followed was the kind that filled a room completely. Nathan stood absolutely still, looking at the telegram, at the name printed there. Miss Amelia Hart, Columbus, Ohio, and felt something he had spent 7 years building begin to crack at the foundation. "You had no right," he said quietly. "Maybe not," Clara said. "But I watched you eat dinner alone for 7 years. I watched you walk past Margaret's garden every morning and not touch a single thing in it. I watched you turn down every invitation from every decent person in this county because you decided that your life was finished." She took a breath. "I have every right, Nathan, because I love you, and because Margaret would have hated what you've become." He turned then. That was the one thing she should not have said. "Don't," he told her, one word, like a door being slammed. Clara did not flinch. She had grown up with Nathan Cole. She knew which words would land and which would bounce off, and she had chosen this one deliberately. "She arrives Friday," Clara said. "At the 11 o'clock train. You should be there." "I'm going to be at the North Pasture on Friday." "Nathan." "This conversation is over, Clara." He walked out. The door closed behind him, not with a slam, but with a quiet, definitive click that was somehow worse. He did not sleep well the night before Friday. Nathan Cole was not a man who had trouble sleeping. He had built that particular discipline out of pure survival. When a ranch needs running, a man who lies awake, drowning in his own thoughts, is a man who makes mistakes. Mistakes with cattle meant losses. Losses meant ruin. He had made his peace with insomnia years ago by simply refusing to allow it. But Thursday night came for him hard. He lay in the dark, listening to the house settle around him, the old wood speaking in its private language, and he thought about Margaret. Not in the way he usually thought about her, in quick flashes, sealed off, controlled, but in the slow, unguarded way that only happened when his defenses were down. She had wanted children badly. That was the thing Nathan never let himself remember for too long, because the weight of it was still enough to flatten him. She had talked about names before she was even showing. She had made a little drawer in the bedroom, the room that was now locked and had been locked for 7 years, and filled it with small, soft things. A blanket, a pair of shoes barely bigger than a man's palm. She died in the spring of 1879, when the cherry trees along the south fence were in full bloom. The baby did not survive either. A boy. Nathan had known somehow it would be a boy, though he never told anyone that. He learned in the weeks that followed that grief was not something you moved through. It was something that moved into you and rearranged the furniture and decided it was staying. He learned that people would say all the things people say, and that none of it helped, and that eventually the only thing to do was find work and keep doing it until the sun went down and the sun came up again. He had been doing that for 7 years. Clara thought he was disappearing. Maybe she was right. But Nathan had decided that disappearing was better than the alternative, which was caring about something again, and then losing it again. A man who had been through a fire once did not go looking for another match. And now there was a woman on a train heading toward his life. He got up at 5 in the morning and went out to work. He told himself he was going to the north pasture. At 10:30, he saddled his horse and rode into town. He would never explain to anyone why he went. Not to Clara, who would have taken it as a victory. Not to his ranch hand, Hector, who saw him ride out in his better coat and had the wisdom not to say a single word. Not to anyone in town who noted his arrival with the particular attention that small Montana towns pay to any deviation from routine. Nathan told himself he was going to meet the train because the woman deserved a proper end to this situation. She deserved to hear it from him directly, not from a telegram, not from Clara's apologetic letter. She had traveled from Ohio on the strength of a promise that was never his promise to make, and the least he owed her was the truth told honestly to her face. That was what he told himself. He arrived at the platform with 8 minutes to spare. He stood apart from the small cluster of other people waiting a family, expecting a son home from Billings' old Amos Whitfield, picking up a shipment of goods, 2 women Nathan didn't recognize. He stood with his hat in his hands, working the brim between his fingers, and watched the tracks. The train came in right on time. The first passengers off were men mostly traveling salesmen with their sample cases, a rancher from over Cascade Way that Nathan recognized by his hat. Then families. Then a group of young men who had the look of people heading somewhere to start over. And then she stepped off. Nathan knew her immediately, though he could not have said exactly how. Maybe it was the suitcase, one single worn piece of luggage for a journey that was supposed to be permanent. Maybe it was the way she stood on the platform for a moment, before moving the way a person stands when they're trying to get their bearings in a place that was supposed to be familiar, but isn't. Maybe it was the way she was dressed, neat, carefully put together, the kind of careful that takes effort and means something. She was younger than he'd expected. Dark hair. A face that was trying to look composed and mostly succeeding. She had a letter in her hand, one of the letters Clara had written, signed with Nathan's name. He walked toward her. "Miss Hart," he said. She turned, and for 1 second, just one, her face did exactly what relief looks like on a person who has been holding their breath for 4 days. Her shoulders dropped. Her expression opened. "Mr. Cole," she said. She stopped. Something in his face told her. He watched her read it, there watched the relief close back up, watched her go very still. "I owe you an explanation," Nathan said, "and an apology." He told her the truth plainly, the way he did everything. The letters were not his. The advertisement was not his. His sister had placed it without his knowledge or consent, and while he took full responsibility for not knowing about it sooner, the arrangement she had come west to honor did not actually exist. He said it right there on the platform. He said it without softening it, because he did not believe in softening the truth. He had learned the hard way that soft truths cost more in the end than hard ones. Amelia Hart stood and listened to all of it. She did not interrupt him. She did not cry immediately, though he could see the effort it cost her. Her jaw was set. Her hands were still at her sides, one holding the suitcase handle, one still holding that letter. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the platform was thinning out. The family had collected their son and moved on. Amos Whitfield had loaded up his goods and left. The 2 women Nathan didn't know had disappeared somewhere. Just the 2 of them, and the sound of the train sighing on the tracks. "You're telling me," Amelia said very carefully, "that the man I've been corresponding with for 3 months doesn't exist." "The man who wrote those letters is my sister," Nathan said. "The name was mine. The words weren't." She looked down at the letter in her hand. He watched something move through her face, something complicated and private, and he expected anger. He had braced for anger. He knew what to do with anger. She looked up at him and said, "How much did she tell you about me?" The question caught him off guard. "Nothing," he said honestly. "I only found out 4 days ago, so you don't know anything about me." No. Then you don't know that I have no family to go back to. You don't know that I used every dollar I had saved for 6 years to purchase that train ticket. You don't know that I told my landlady she could rent my room to someone else because I wouldn't be coming back. She was not saying any of this to make him feel guilty. He could hear that. She was saying it the way someone states facts clearly without decoration, because facts are what they are. I'm sorry, he said, because there was nothing else to say. Thank you for not lying to me, she said. There were a dozen easier things you could have done. You could have sent a telegram. You could have not come at all and just let me arrive at an empty platform. You could have met me and played a part for a few days before telling me. She paused. Thank you for coming here yourself and saying it plainly. Then her composure cracked just slightly, just at the edges, and she turned her face away, and Nathan Cole stood on that platform and watched a woman absorb a disaster with more dignity than he had managed his own. That was when something began to shift in him that he did not have words for. Where are you planning to go? He asked. I don't know yet, she said. The next eastbound train doesn't come through until Wednesday. I know, I checked. There's no hotel in this town. I know that too. A small tired pause. Mrs. Hartley at the general store told me there might be a woman on Pinecroft Street who takes in boarders occasionally. Nora Simmons, Nathan said. She's been in Bozeman all month. Her daughter just had a baby. Amelia turned back to face him. The composure was fully back in place, which somehow made it worse. Then I'll figure something out, she said. He stood there. He turned his hat around in his hands twice. He looked at the train tracks, at the clear Montana sky, at everything except the woman in front of him. I have a spare room, he said. At the ranch. It's nothing elaborate, but it's clean. You're welcome to stay until Wednesday, or until you've decided what you're going to do. There's no obligation attached to it. You'd be a guest. Amelia looked at him steadily. Why? She said. Because my sister put you in this situation, and because it's the decent thing to do. Another long look. Nathan had the sense of being evaluated with considerable precision. I won't be charity, she said. I didn't offer charity, I offered a room. I'll help with work while I'm there. I'm not a woman who sits idle. I didn't expect you to be. She picked up her suitcase. All right, Mr. Cole, I accept. Hector was waiting with the wagon. When Nathan came around the side of the station with Amelia Hart walking beside him, Hector's face did a complicated series of things before settling into a careful neutrality that told Nathan his ranch hand would be talking about this for weeks. Miss Hart, Nathan said, this is Hector Vega. He's worked the Cole Ranch for 15 years and he talks too much. Only because you don't talk enough, Hector said pleasantly. He took off his hat. Ma'am, welcome to Montana. I hope the train ride wasn't too terrible. It was fine, thank you, Amelia said. She looked at the wagon, at the wide open country spreading out beyond the edge of town, at the mountains sitting enormous and blue in the distance. It was the first time Nathan had seen something other than composure on her face. Not distress this time, but something quieter. Something close to wonder. It's bigger than I expected, she said. Not to him specifically, just out loud. It usually is, Hector said. She climbed up into the wagon without waiting for help. Not out of stubbornness. Nathan sensed, but simply because it did not occur to her to wait. He noticed that. The ride out to Cole Ranch took 40 minutes. Hector drove, which gave Nathan the option of sitting in the back with Amelia, or up front with Hector. He chose the back because the back was where the guest should sit, and he was the host, and he was not going to invent another reason. They did not talk much during the ride. Montana in summer required no commentary. The land spoke loudly enough for itself. All that blue sky and gold grass, and the smell of sage and river, and something indefinably large. Nathan had grown up with it, and still felt on certain mornings that it was more than a person deserved. Amelia did not try to fill the silence. He noticed that too. When the ranch came into view, she looked at it with that same careful measuring attention she seemed to bring to everything. Cole Ranch was not a small operation. The main house sat on a gentle rise, 2 stories wide porch running the full front length built by Nathan's father in the territory's early days and expanded twice since. Beyond it were the barn, the bunkhouse, the equipment sheds, and stretching out in every direction, the land. The cattle were out in the north and east pastures. The horses moved slowly near the creek. It was a working ranch. Everything on it had a purpose. Nothing was decorative, except Nathan thought suddenly the garden along the south side of the house. Margaret's garden. 7 years untouched. He had walked past it every day for 7 years and had not pulled a single weed or planted a single seed, because doing so would have felt like erasing something. But it no longer looked like a garden. It looked like a place where a garden used to be all gone to seed and tangle, and he had not let himself see it clearly until this moment when a stranger was looking at it with him. Clara was waiting on the porch. Of course she was. She came down the steps before the wagon had fully stopped, her face arranged into an expression that was doing its absolute best to look innocent. Nathan recognized it as the same expression she had worn at age 9 when she broke his father's good pocket watch and spent 3 days pretending it had always been broken. "You must be Amelia," Clara said. "I'm Clara Cole, Nathan's sister, and I want you to know right now, before anything else is said, that I am entirely responsible for this situation, and I am genuinely sorry for the position I put you in." Amelia looked at Clara for a moment. "Your letters were very kind," she said. Clara blinked. That was not the response she'd prepared for. "I thank you. I tried. You wrote about your brother, the way someone writes about a person they love very much." Amelia continued. "I could tell you believed everything you said about him." A brief pause. "I'm not angry with you, Miss Cole. I understand the impulse, even if the execution left something to be desired." Clara turned to look at Nathan with an expression that said very clearly, "Where did you find this woman?" Nathan picked up Amelia's suitcase from the wagon bed and walked it up onto the porch without saying anything. He showed her the spare room himself. It was on the second floor at the end of the hall, a room that had once been intended as a nursery and had been used as a storage room after. He had cleared it out the previous day, replaced the old linens with clean ones, swept the floor, and opened the windows to air it out. It was plain. Functional. "It's not much," he said. "It's fine," she said, and she meant it. He could tell the difference between polite and genuine. She set her suitcase down on the floor beside the small dresser and looked at the room with that measuring look, cataloging. "I meant what I said," she told him. "About working. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden. I will be if I sit idle. Let me help with something. Cooking, cleaning, mending, whatever needs doing. It would make me feel better." Nathan leaned against the doorframe. He looked at this woman, this stranger, who had arrived in his life through a door he had not opened, who had absorbed an enormous blow with more grace than he had managed his own far lesser trials, who was now standing in his spare room asking to earn her keep. "Breakfast is usually at 6, he said. "If you want to help with that, I won't argue. 6 is fine. The kitchen is at the bottom of the stairs, second left. I'll find it." He pushed off the door frame, started to leave. "Mr. Cole," she said. He stopped. "I know this is not what you wanted," she said. "I know my being here is uncomfortable for you. I just want you to know that I have no expectations. I'm not going to try to change your mind or wear you down, or make this into something it isn't. You were honest with me, and I'm going to be honest with you. I'll be gone by Wednesday, and I won't be any trouble before then." Nathan looked at her. "All right," he said. He went back downstairs. He stood in the kitchen for a long moment doing nothing. Then he went to find Clara. He found her on the back porch, sitting with a cup of coffee and the particular posture of someone who is preparing to be yelled at and has made peace with it. "Before you say anything," Clara started. "I'm not going to yell," Nathan said. He sat down in the other chair. "Tell me about her." Clara blinked. That was also not the response she'd prepared for. "Her letters," Nathan said. "She wrote back to you. What did she say?" Clara was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice had lost its defensive edge and taken on something softer. "She grew up in Columbus," Clara said. "Her father was a schoolteacher. He died when she was 19, and her mother followed him 2 years later. She had a younger brother. She talked about him sometimes, how funny he was, how much he loved the outdoors. He died 3 years ago. Fever." Nathan said nothing. She worked as a seamstress after her parents died, for a family on the east side of the city. She lived in their house, cooked for them, made all their clothes, taught their daughters needlework. They paid her almost nothing because she had nowhere else to go. Clara wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. She wrote once that she felt like she was living inside other people's lives and couldn't find a door back to her own. The silence stretched. "She sounds like a good person," Nathan said finally. "She sounds like someone who deserved better than what life gave her," Clara said quietly. "Same as someone else I know." Nathan looked out at the yard. "Don't start," he said. "I'm not starting anything. I'm just observing." "She's leaving Wednesday." "Nathan." "She's leaving Wednesday, Clara, and you're going to stop whatever it is you're building in your head right now." He got up and walked back inside. But he stood at the kitchen window for a long time after that, and he did not go back out to the north pasture, and he did not pretend even to himself that he didn't know exactly which room she was in, or that he wasn't thinking about what Clara had told him. Dinner that night was the strangest meal Nathan Cole had sat through in 7 years. It was also, if he was being honest, in a place where honesty cost him something, the best meal he had eaten in at least that long. Amelia had come downstairs at 4:30 without being asked, and had taken stock of the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been running households since before it was her choice. She had found the salt pork, and the dried beans, and the potatoes, and the half-wheel of hard cheese, and by 6 o'clock she had produced a meal that made Hector stop talking mid-sentence when he walked through the door. "Good Lord," Hector said. "Did you—" "Sit down," Amelia said pleasantly, "before it gets cold." Hector sat down. Nathan sat across from him. Clara sat at the end of the table wearing an expression of complete and radiant satisfaction that Nathan refused to acknowledge. They ate. Hector, who was constitutionally incapable of sustained silence, asked Amelia about Ohio. She answered easily without deflection, but also without oversharing the way a person talks when they're comfortable with strangers, but not naive about them. She asked Hector about the ranch, about the cattle operation, about what the winters were like in this part of Montana. She did not ask Nathan anything, but once near the end of the meal, she passed him the bread without him asking for it, just caught the slight direction of his glance, and moved without making a thing of it. And Nathan registered the gesture in the quiet part of himself that registered things he was not ready to examine. After dinner, she washed the dishes. Nathan tried to tell her she didn't need to. "I know I don't need to," she said, already elbow-deep in the wash basin. "I want to." He dried them. He didn't know why. They worked side by side in the kitchen without speaking much. Just the sound of water and the clinking of plates, and the night coming in through the window above the sink. At one point their hands reached for the same dish towel, and she pulled back and said, "Sorry." And he said, "No, go ahead." And then neither of them said anything for a while. When the kitchen was clean, she said good night and went upstairs. Nathan stood in the kitchen alone and listened to her footsteps cross the ceiling above him, light and deliberate, moving to the far end of the hall, stopping at the room that was supposed to be a nursery. He blew out the lamp and went to his own room. He did not sleep any better than he had the night before. The next morning she was in the kitchen before him. This bothered Nathan more than he was willing to say. He was always the first one up on Cole Ranch, had been for 15 years, since the day his father died, and the ranch became his. He was downstairs before Hector, before Clara, before anyone, because the morning was his, and the work was his, and the responsibility was his. That was the order of things. She had coffee on the stove and bacon in the pan, and she did not look up when he came in, just said, "Good morning, Mr. Cole," and kept working. He poured his coffee and sat at the table, and tried to remember the last time someone had had coffee ready for him and could not come up with an answer. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "You said breakfast at 6, she said. "It's 5:45. "I said I wouldn't argue if you wanted to help. I didn't mean you needed to start before dawn. I don't sleep well in new places," she said. "I'd rather be useful." He drank his coffee. After a moment he said, "Clara told me about your family last night." Her hands slowed slightly over the pan, then continued. "She knows quite a bit about me. We wrote for 3 months. I know. I'm sorry for your losses. She was quiet for a moment. "Thank you." "I know what it is," he said, "to lose people." He had not meant to say that. It came out of its own accord, the way things sometimes did in the quiet of early morning, when a man's defenses hadn't fully come up yet. She looked at him then, over her shoulder from the stove. A look that was brief, but not small. "I know you do," she said. "Clara told me about your wife." Nathan's jaw tightened. "I'm not going to say anything about it," Amelia said, turning back to the pan. "I just want you to know that I know. And that I'm not going to pretend I don't know, because I think pretending is exhausting, and neither of us has the energy for it." A long silence. "You're a very direct person," Nathan said. "I was raised by a schoolteacher," she said. Imprecision was not tolerated. Something moved through her voice that might have been the edge of a smile. He found himself against his own wishes, doing the same. He looked down at his coffee cup before she could turn around and see it. She found the garden on Thursday. He didn't know she'd been out there until he came around the south side of the house after checking the fence line and found her standing in front of it, with her hands in her apron pockets, looking at the tangle of what had once been something tended and beloved. He stopped. "I'm sorry," she said without turning around. "I didn't know this was—" She turned. "I'll go back inside." "It's all right," he said. She looked at him carefully. "Is it? There's no fence around it. You didn't go anywhere you weren't allowed." She looked back at the garden. "It was beautiful once," she said. "You can still see it, the shape of it, the way it was laid out." A pause. Roses along the south edge, herbs in the middle. She knew what she was doing. Nathan did not say anything. "I won't touch it," Amelia said. "I want you to know that. It's not my place." "I appreciate that," he said. She turned from the garden and walked back toward the house. He stayed where he was and looked at what 7 years of not touching something had done to it. For the first time, the word that came to him was not sacred. The word that came to him was neglected. He pushed the thought away and followed her inside. Saturday something happened. One of the ranch dogs, a young shepherd mix named Copper, barely a year old, took a bad fall from the hayloft while a stable hand was moving bales. By the time Nathan heard about it and got to the barn, the dog was lying on its side in the straw, one foreleg bent at an angle that was wrong, breathing fast and shallow with pain. Nathan crouched down and ran careful hands over the leg. Not broken through the skin. Likely fractured. He had dealt with injured animals all his life. He knew what to do. He had sent for Hector, who had more experience with this than anyone. "Is he all right?" He looked up. Amelia was standing in the barn door, still wearing her apron from the kitchen. She must have seen him cross the yard at speed. "Fractured leg, I think. Maybe worse. I'm waiting for Hector." She came closer. She did not ask permission. She simply knelt down on the other side of the dog and put one hand very gently on its flank. Not restraining it, just touching it. The dog, who had been trembling, let out a slow breath. Nathan watched that happen. "He's scared," Amelia said quietly. "More than he's in pain, I think." "Animals often are. People too," she said. She kept her hand on the dog's flank. "My father used to say that fear is just pain with no address. You feel it everywhere because you don't know where to put it." Nathan looked at her. She was looking at the dog. Hector arrived 5 minutes later. He examined the leg, confirmed the fracture, splinted it with practiced efficiency, while Nathan held the dog still. Amelia stayed on the other side the entire time, one hand on the dog's flank, not getting in the way, not offering unnecessary commentary, just being a steady presence. When it was done, and Copper had settled into the straw with a water bowl nearby, Hector looked at Amelia with an expression Nathan could not fully read. "You've done that before," Hector said. "Sat with an animal like that." "My father kept livestock when I was young," she said, "before things got difficult financially." She stood up, brushing straw from her apron. "Scared things need to know they're not alone, that's all." She went back to the house. Hector looked at Nathan. "Don't," Nathan said. "I didn't say anything." "You were about to." Hector looked back at the barn door where Amelia had gone. "I was going to say," he said mildly, That she's good with animals, and she'd be useful to have around. That's all I was going to say. Nathan stood up. Wednesday, he said. She's leaving Wednesday. Yes, sir, Hector said with the particular tone of a man who believes something is absolutely not going to happen. Sunday evening. Clara found Nathan standing outside on the porch after supper. The sky was going all the colors it went in Montana at that hour. Amber, then rose, then a blue so deep it hurt to look at directly. Nathan was watching it the way he had watched skies his whole life, the way a man watches something that doesn't ask anything from him. She asked me today, Clara said, coming to stand beside him, about the locked room. Nathan went very still. She wasn't prying, Clara said quickly. She just noticed it the door at the end of the upstairs hall that's always closed, and she asked me quietly when you weren't around, whether it was something she should avoid, or whether she'd already accidentally done something wrong. What did you tell her? I told her it was your wife's room, that you'd kept it closed since she died. Clara paused. She said, I understand. I won't go near it. And then she changed the subject immediately. She didn't push. She didn't ask why. Nathan said nothing. Most people ask why, Clara said. I know. She just accepted it, like it was your right to keep something private. Another pause. Nathan, she's a good person. I know that. Then why? Because knowing someone is a good person doesn't mean anything has to happen, Nathan said. Because she deserves someone who can give her a real life, not a man who is half a ghost, living in a house full of things he can't let go of. Because Wednesday is Wednesday, and she is going to leave, and that is how this ends. Clara was quiet for a long time. And what if she doesn't want to leave? She said softly. She hasn't given any indication. Nathan, look at what she's done in 4 days. She cleaned this house. She cooked for the hands. She sat with your injured dog for an hour, holding her hand on its side to keep it calm. She knows where every tool in your kitchen lives. She gets up before you do. Clara turned to look at him. She is building a life here. Maybe she doesn't know that's what she's doing. Maybe you don't either. But I can see it. Nathan looked at the sky. Wednesday, he said. Clara went back inside. He stayed on the porch until the last of the light was gone, and the stars came out one by one over Montana, and the night settled cold and enormous around the ranch, and somewhere inside the house, a light was on in the spare room at the end of the hall. He watched it until it went out. Then he went inside, and he walked to the bottom of the stairs, and he stood there for a moment in the dark hallway, listening to nothing. And something inside him, something he had believed was finished and sealed and done, shifted like a foundation settling after a long freeze. He walked to his room. He did not try to stop it. He just carried it carefully the way you carry something fragile that you are not yet sure you have the right to hold. Monday came the way. Mondays always came on Cole Ranch hard and early, with no ceremony. The cattle needed moving to the east pasture. A section of the north fence had come down overnight in the wind, and 2 of the younger hands had shown up late after spending Sunday evening in town. Nathan handled all of it before 8 in the morning, with the practiced efficiency of a man who had long since stopped expecting things to go smoothly, and simply prepared for the probability that they wouldn't. What he had not prepared for was coming back to the house at 8:30, and finding Amelia Hart on her knees in the yard beside the bunkhouse, showing young Denny Walsh how to properly stitch a torn saddle strap. Denny was 19 years old, the newest hand on the ranch, and he was watching Amelia's hands with the focused attention of someone taking a lesson seriously. You're pulling it too tight at the turn, Amelia was saying. It'll hold for a week, and then split at exactly the wrong moment. Ease up just here, feel how it seats differently. Denny felt it. His face changed. That's better. Leather remembers how it's treated, Amelia said. Same as people. Nathan stood where he was and watched this for a moment longer than he needed to before walking on. At breakfast, which she had ready. Before he sat down again without being asked, he said, You know leather work. My father's neighbor was a cobbler, she said, setting coffee in front of him. He let me learn in exchange for helping his wife with the housework. I was 14. She sat down across from him with her own cup. I know a little of a lot of things. It's what happens when you spend your life being useful to other people. She said it plainly without bitterness. But Nathan heard the weight inside it. Is that why you answered the advertisement? He asked. To stop being useful to other people. She looked at her coffee. I answered it because I wanted something of my own, she said. A home that belonged to me. Work that built something for me instead of building things for people who forgot my name when I left the room. She looked up. That's not a criticism of you or your situation. I'm just answering your question honestly. I appreciate that, he said. Hector came in from outside, stomped his boots at the door, saw the two of them sitting across from each other at the table, and performed an impressive piece of dramatic indifference as he poured himself coffee and sat at the far end without saying a word. Nathan caught the slight curl at the corner of Amelia's mouth and looked away before anything happened to his own expression. Wednesday was 2 days away. He was not going to forget that. But the morning moved forward, and she was in it, and there was nothing he could do about that, except work. That afternoon, Clara pulled Amelia aside. Nathan saw them talking in the garden near the edge of it, not inside it, from the barn window, while he was checking the tack. He could not hear what they were saying, but he could see the conversation Clara animated, leaning forward the way she did when she wanted something. Amelia, listening, her head tilted slightly, the way she did when she was genuinely thinking about what someone was saying, rather than waiting for her turn to speak. After a few minutes, Amelia said something that made Clara stop. Whatever it was, Clara stood up straighter and went quiet, in a way that Clara almost never went quiet. Then Amelia put her hand briefly on Clara's arm and walked back to the house. Nathan told himself he was not going to ask. He lasted until dinner. What did Clara want? He said when they were washing dishes, and Hector and Clara had both gone out to the porch. She wanted to know if I'd consider staying, Amelia said. Longer than Wednesday. Nathan's hands stilled on the dish he was drying. What did you say? I said it wasn't her offer to make. The kitchen was very quiet. And, Nathan said, and that was the end of the conversation. She handed him a wet plate, and he took it without looking at her. I meant what I told you on the platform. I'm not going to make this into something you didn't ask for. He dried the plate, set it on the shelf, reached for the next one. What would you do? He said. If you left Wednesday, where would you go? I've been thinking about that, she said. There's a town about 60 miles east Harlow that has a dry goods operation. I write a decent hand and I can keep books. I thought I might inquire there. You'd take a clerk's job. I'd take an honest job. Nathan said nothing for a moment. Then, Harlow's a rough town. Half mining, half cattle, not much law. I've managed rough situations before. I know that, he said. That's why I'm telling you, not warning you. She glanced at him sideways. Just a quick look. That's a kind thing to say, she said. It's an honest thing, he said. There's a difference. She turned back to the basin. After a moment she said quietly, almost to herself, You're not what I expected. What did you expect? The letters described you as steady and hard-working and fair. I expected a practical man. A brief pause. You are those things. But you're also more careful than I expected. You think before you speak. You don't say things you don't mean. Most people say too much, Nathan said. Yes, she agreed. They do. The dishes were done. She dried her hands on her apron, folded it neatly, and hung it on the hook by the stove. She did it the same way she did everything, with quiet attention, no wasted motion. Good night, Mr. Cole, she said. Good night, Miss Hart, he said. She went upstairs. He stood in the kitchen alone and thought about Harlow, 60 miles east, and whether the dry goods operation there knew what kind of person was about to walk through their door and ask for an honest job. I thought they probably didn't deserve her. He put that thought away firmly and went to bed. Tuesday was the day everything changed, though Nathan would not understand that until later. It started normally. Fence repair in the morning, cattle count in the afternoon, a disagreement with his supplier in town over a late delivery of winter feed that Nathan resolved with the particular cold precision he brought to business disputes. He came back to the ranch at 3 o'clock in a mood that was not terrible, but was not warm either, and found the kitchen empty and the house quieter than usual. Clara was out visiting a neighbor. Hector was with the hands in the east pasture. The ranch moved at its own pace, and he was used to being alone in it. He poured water from the jug and stood at the kitchen window. From here he could see the south yard. The equipment shed the edge of the barn. What he could not see, but what he knew was there, if he turned his head far enough to the right, was Margaret's garden. I was thinking about what Amelia had said. You can still see it, the shape of it, the way it was laid out. He set down the water cup. He went outside. He stood at the edge of the garden and looked at it with the honest eyes he had been avoiding for 7 years. Clara had been right that morning on the porch, though he would have died before telling her so. It was neglected, not sacred, not preserved, neglected. Margaret had loved this garden the way she loved everything, with her whole attention, with deep knowledge, with the kind of care that showed in results. What was here now would have broken her heart. I was standing there, hands in his pockets, confronting that when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Amelia stopped 4 feet away. She was carrying a basket. She'd clearly been to the root cellar, and she had come around the corner of the house without expecting him to be there. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I didn't know you were—" "It's all right," he said. She looked at him, then at the garden, then back at him. "She would have wanted it tended," he said. The words came out before he chose them. He wasn't sure why he said it. He hadn't said it to anyone, had barely allowed himself to think it. Amelia did not say anything. She was the kind of person who believed things should be cared for. Nathan continued. He was looking at the garden, not at Amelia. "Plants, animals, people." She thought neglect was its own kind of damage. She used to say— He stopped, cleared his throat. She had a lot of opinions about what things deserved. "She sounds like someone worth listening to," Amelia said quietly. She was. A beat. She was the most alive person I ever knew, which made it— He stopped again. This time it took longer to collect himself, which made the losing her what it was. The wind moved through the yard. Somewhere across the pasture one of the horses called. "I know I can't fix this," Amelia said carefully. "And I know it's not my place. But if you ever decide you want help bringing it back the garden, I know enough about growing things to be useful." She paused. "Not to erase what it was, to honor what it was. There's a difference." He looked at her then. Her face held nothing calculating. No angle. No performance of sympathy designed to soften him. Just a woman standing in a yard offering something she genuinely had to give, clearly aware it might be refused. "Why would you do that?" he said. "You're leaving tomorrow." She held his gaze. "Because it deserves to be more than this," she said, "whether I'm here or not." Something moved through Nathan Cole's chest that he had no clean word for. He nodded once and walked back inside. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time. He thought about what it would mean for her to leave. He thought about Harlow 60 miles east, and the dry goods store, and Amelia Hart, keeping books for people who would not know that she could splint a saddle strap and calm a frightened dog, and say the exact right thing to a man standing at the edge of his own grief. He thought about Clara, who had done a foolish, loving, presumptuous thing, and might he was not ready to admit, this might not have been entirely wrong. He thought about Wednesday, and then he got up and walked to the foot of the stairs and stood there in the hallway looking up. Then he walked to the hallway where the locked door was. He stood in front of it. He had not touched the handle in 7 years. He had walked past it every day. He had pretended it wasn't there and simultaneously shaped his entire life around it. He put his hand on the handle. He stood there. He did not open it, but his hand stayed on it for a long time, longer than he expected, and when he finally let go and walked back to the kitchen, something about the way he moved through the house was different. Fractionally, almost imperceptibly, but different. Hector noticed it at supper. He didn't say anything. But Nathan caught the look his ranch hand exchanged with Clara across the table quick as a blink, and he chose to let it pass. That night, Nathan did not sleep again. This time, he did not fight it. He lay in the dark and let himself think fully, and without flinching, about what his life had become. He let himself see it from the outside, the way a stranger might see it. The large house maintained out of duty, The locked room, the meals eaten alone, the years of choosing work over everything that wasn't work. He let himself hear it the way Amelia had said it without knowing she was saying it about him living inside other people's lives and unable to find a door back to his own. The difference between him and her was that she had been made invisible by circumstances. He had chosen invisibility himself, one quiet decision at a time, and called it grief, and then called it practicality, and then called it just the way things were. He stared at the ceiling. Down the hall, the spare room was quiet. Tomorrow she was leaving. He had said so. She had accepted it. That was how it was going to go because that was what he had decided, and he was Nathan Cole. And when he decided something, he did not change his mind because feelings showed up inconveniently at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. He sat up. I was not going to go knock on her door at 11 o'clock. He was not a man who did things like that, and he had more respect for her than that, and he was not. Despite what his chest was doing, confused about who he was and what was and wasn't appropriate. But he got up. He pulled on his boots. He went downstairs. I went to the kitchen and lit the small lamp on the table and sat down and did something he had not done in years. He took a piece of paper from the drawer where Clara kept correspondence supplies, and he picked up the pen and he stared at the blank paper for a long time. He was not a man who wrote things down. He was not a man who examined his interior life with any particular enthusiasm. He had always found it more useful to act than to reflect. But he wrote. He wrote for 20 minutes, and what he wrote was not a letter to Amelia. He was clear on that, firmly clear. It was not a letter he was going to give anyone. What he wrote was an honest account of the last 5 days written out for himself, the way a man might lay out a set of accounts to see what the numbers actually said. What the numbers said at the end of 20 minutes was this. He was not the same man who had stood on that platform and told her to leave. He did not know what that meant. He was not ready to know what it meant, but he let himself see it plainly without flinching. He folded the paper and put it in his coat pocket and blew out the lamp and went back upstairs. In the morning, she would leave. He went to sleep. She was already up when he came down. He knew she would be. The lamp was on, the coffee was ready, the smell of biscuits was in the air. He came into the kitchen, and she was at the stove, and she said, "Good morning, Mr. Cole," without turning around, and he said, "Good morning, Miss Hart," and everything about it was exactly the same as every morning that week, except that it was Wednesday, and it was the last one. He sat at the table. She brought coffee. She sat across from him, and they both drank in silence for a moment. "You don't have to cook today," he said. "I know," she said. "Your train is at 11. "I know." He drank his coffee. She drank hers. "You'll be all right," he said. "In Harlow." She looked at him over her cup. "Probably," she said. "I've been all right in worse situations." "I know that. I know you know that." They sat in the complicated silence of people who have run out of indirect things to say and are not yet ready to say the direct ones. The biscuits finished, and she brought them to the table, and Hector came in from outside, and Clara came downstairs. And the morning took the shape it always did, and Nathan sat in the middle of it, and felt something he had no practice managing. At 9:30, Amelia went upstairs to collect her things. Clara followed her. Hector refilled his coffee and sat back down across from Nathan and said nothing, which was so unlike Hector that the silence itself was a kind of statement. "Say what you're going to say," Nathan told him. Hector considered for a moment. "I've worked for you for 15 years, he said. "I've never once told you your business." "That's true." "I'm not going to start now." "Good. I'll just say," Hector continued, "that in 15 years I have not once seen you come downstairs for breakfast and be glad about it. This week you were glad about it, every morning." He drank his coffee. "That's all I'll say." Nathan looked at the table. "She's leaving," he said. "Yes, sir," Hector said. Upstairs he could hear footsteps, slow ones, the kind of footsteps a person takes when they are moving through a house they are not going to be in again, and they are trying not to make that mean too much. He heard her pause at the top of the stairs. He heard something else, a sound he could not identify, at first low and brief. Then he understood what it was. Clara crying, quietly, trying to hide it, and then Amelia's voice murmuring something in response, too low to make out the words. Then Clara's voice, "I'm sorry, I made such a mess of this." And Amelia, "You tried to do something kind, don't be sorry for that." Nathan stared at his coffee cup. Hector looked at the window. The footsteps resumed, both of them coming down the stairs. Amelia came into the kitchen with her suitcase, her coat on, her composure fully in place. Clara came behind her, looking wrecked in the private way of people who cry beautifully when they are sad and don't want anyone to notice. "The wagon's ready," Hector said, standing. "Thank you, Hector," Amelia said. She looked around the kitchen, the clean kitchen, the stove she had lit every morning, the dishes she had washed every night. She looked at it without sentiment, just a clean private goodbye. Then she looked at Nathan. "Mr. Cole," she said, "thank you for the room, and for the honesty, and for—" She paused briefly, all the rest. Nathan stood. He had the folded paper in his coat pocket. He did not touch it. "Miss Hart," he said. And then he stopped because all the things he might have said stacked up behind his teeth, and none of them came out in the right order. What he said was, "The job in Harlow, if it doesn't work out, you should know that you have options." She looked at him steadily. "What kind of options?" "Clara has been after me for 2 years to hire someone to manage the household accounts," he said. "I've been putting it off because I didn't want a stranger in the house." A pause. "You're not a stranger anymore." The kitchen was very quiet. "Are you offering me a job?" Amelia said. "I'm saying the option exists, if Harlow doesn't work." "That's not the same as offering." "No," he admitted. "It isn't." She held his gaze for a long moment. Something moved through her face that he could not read completely, something careful and complicated and not nothing. "I'll keep that in mind," she said. Hector carried her suitcase out. Clara embraced her briefly and fiercely and let go. Amelia walked out the door. Nathan followed as far as the porch. He stood there and watched Hector help her up into the wagon. She did not wait. He noticed, but she let Hector offer and accepted the hand this time, which was different from the first time, and watched Hector climb up to the seat and take the reins. Amelia sat in the back. She did not look at the ranch as they pulled away. She looked forward. Nathan stood on the porch with his hands at his sides. The wagon moved down the road. He watched it until the road bent around the stand of cottonwoods and disappeared. Clara came to stand beside him. She did not say anything. She was learning. He stood on the porch and felt Wednesday morning exactly for what it was, without softening it or dressing it up in practicality. He let himself feel the particular shape of the silence that had moved back into Cole Ranch like a tenant returning to a room it had never actually vacated. He put his hand in his coat pocket. He felt the folded paper there. He took it out. He did not open it. He stood there holding it for a long moment. Then he looked at Clara. "How fast," he said, "can Hector actually drive that wagon?" Clara's face did something extraordinary. "When he has reason to," she said. "Very fast." Nathan stepped off the porch. "Saddle my horse," he said. He was already walking to the barn. He pushed the horse hard, not recklessly. Nathan Cole had never been reckless with an animal in his life, but hard the way you push when something matters, and you have not yet decided to admit that it matters, so you just ride and let the speed make the decision for you. The road between Cole Ranch and town was 4 miles of packed earth and summer dust, and he covered it in less than 15 minutes. And when he came around the last bend and saw the wagon still a 1/4 mile from the station depot, something in his chest loosened by exactly 1 notch. Hector heard the hooves and looked back over his shoulder. To his eternal credit, Hector said nothing. He simply pulled the wagon to a stop and waited. Nathan brought the horse alongside. He was breathing harder than the ride warranted. He looked at the back of the wagon where Amelia sat with her suitcase beside her facing forward, the way she had been when they left the ranch. She had heard the horse. She had not turned around. "Miss Hart," he said. She turned then. Her face was composed. Carefully, deliberately composed in the way he had learned meant she was working at it. "Mr. Cole," she said. He had ridden 4 miles at speed, and he still didn't have the words in the right order. He had the folded paper in his pocket, and he was not going to hand it to her, because it was not a letter to give someone. It was a man talking honestly to himself, and he had enough dignity left not to confuse the two. "The job isn't temporary," he said. "If you want it." Amelia looked at him. "You said options," she said. "If Harlow didn't work." "Harlow isn't going to work," he said. "Not because the job won't exist, but because you'd be wasted in a dry goods store keeping books for men who won't know what they have." He stopped, started again. "Cole Ranch needs a household manager. It has needed one for 2 years. Clara has been telling me so, and I have been ignoring her because I didn't want to admit that the house had become what it had become." A pause. "I'm admitting it now." The wagon sat still in the middle of the road. Hector studied the horizon with great professional interest. "This isn't charity," Nathan said. "I need the work done. You can do it. That's a transaction, not a favor." Amelia looked at him for a long moment. "You rode 4 miles to offer me a household manager position," she said. "Yes." "In the time it took Hector to drive 3/4 of a mile." "Yes." "Because you suddenly realized the ranch needed a household manager." "That's correct." Another long pause. Something moved through her eyes that was not quite amusement and not quite something else, but lived in the territory between them. "All right, Mr. Cole," she said. "I'll take the job." Hector picked up the reins without being asked, and turned the wagon around, and Nathan rode beside it back toward the ranch. And he did not say anything else, because there was nothing else that needed saying, and neither did she. And that was one of the things, though. He was not cataloging things. That was one of the things about her that had gotten under his skin. She knew when silence was the right answer. They came back to the ranch to find Clara standing on the porch, exactly where Nathan had left her, arms crossed, wearing the expression of a woman who had not moved because she understood that moving would have been premature. When she saw the wagon turn in with Amelia in the back, she closed her eyes briefly. Then she opened them and schooled her face into something more neutral, because she understood without being told that this was not the moment for triumph. "Well," she said when they had pulled up, "that was a short trip." "Change of plan," Heck said, cheerfully climbing down. Amelia stepped off the wagon. She looked at Clara. "I'll take the room on the 2nd floor," she said. "If it's still available." "It is," Clara said. "Good." She picked up her suitcase. "I'll need a proper accounting of the household expenses going back 6 months. And I'll want to speak with whoever handles the supply orders." She paused at the porch steps and looked back at Nathan, who was still on his horse. "When you have time, Mr. Cole." "This afternoon," he said. "This afternoon," she agreed. She went inside. Clara looked at Nathan. He dismounted and handed the reins to Hector and walked past his sister into the house without meeting her eyes. "Not a word," he said. "I'm not saying anything," Clara said, following him in. "You're saying things with your face." My face is completely neutral." "Clara." "I'm just happy," she said. "A person is allowed to be happy." He went to his office and closed the door. He sat at his desk and looked at the wall for a while. He was not a man who smiled for no reason. He had not been one since 1879. But there was something happening at the corners of his mouth that he was going to ignore completely and take to his grave. He pulled out the ranch ledger and got to work. The weeks that followed had a different shape to them. Nathan noticed the change the way you notice a shift in weather, not dramatically, not all at once, but in small, persistent ways that accumulate until you look up one morning and realize the season has turned. Amelia Hart moved through Cole Ranch with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been managing other people's households since she was old enough to reach the kitchen counter, and within 10 days she had done something Nathan had not thought possible. She had made the house feel like it was being lived in. She reorganized the supply ordering system, eliminating the chronic shortfalls that had plagued the ranch kitchen because nobody had been tracking what was used against what was ordered. She established a mending station in the spare room off the kitchen, and within a week, half the ranch hands had a rotation for bringing in torn work clothes that came back repaired without fanfare. She found the household accounts a chaos of receipts and informal ledgers that had not been properly reconciled since Margaret died, and spent 3 evenings at the kitchen table sorting them into order, her pen moving across the pages with the confident precision of someone who had kept books in harder conditions than this. Nathan watched all of it from a careful distance. He had offered her a job, a transaction. That was the line he had drawn, and he was keeping to it. He treated her with the same respectful practicality he brought to every working relationship on the ranch. He did not seek out her company. He did not manufacture reasons to be in the same room with her. But he noticed things. He noticed that she had started leaving the kitchen window open in the mornings, because she had figured out without being told that he liked the smell of the outdoor air with his coffee. He noticed that when Denny Walsh had a bad week, made a significant error with a gate latch that let 6 cattle into the wrong pasture. She was the one who talked to him privately and steadily, and Denny came out of that conversation with his dignity intact. He noticed that she had begun very slowly, very quietly, beginning with the outermost edge pulling weeds at the border of Margaret's garden. Not inside it, not the planted beds, just the edges where the neglect had crept out past the garden's original boundaries. He noticed that, and he did not say anything, and she did not say anything, and it kept happening. 3 weeks in, they had their first real disagreement. It was about the north bunkhouse. 2 of the older ranch hands men, who had been with Nathan for years, were bunking in a section of the bunkhouse where the roof had developed a significant problem over the winter. Nathan knew about it. He had it on his list. He had it on his list below. 12 other things that were more immediately critical to the operation of the cattle side of the ranch, because the bunkhouse problem was a comfort issue, and the cattle issues were a livelihood issue, and Nathan had always been ruthlessly practical about that ordering. Amelia brought it to him in his office. She knocked. She came in. She stood in front of his desk. She did not sit down uninvited, and she told him plainly that she had been in the north bunkhouse to deliver mended supplies and had seen the problem with her own eyes and believed it needed to be addressed before the fall rains arrived. "It's on the list," Nathan said. "Where on the list?" He showed her the list. She looked at where the bunkhouse sat on it. She looked up. "Hector has been sleeping under that roof for 15 years, she said. "I know. When it fails, and it will fail before the end of the season, it will fail on him. I'm aware of the risk." "Then move it up the list," she said, simply, calmly. Not a demand, not an accusation, a clear statement of what the situation required. "The east pasture fence is failing," Nathan said. "A failing fence means losing cattle. Lost cattle means—" "I know what it means," she said. "I've been reading your accounts for 3 weeks. I know exactly what losing cattle means to this operation." She paused. "I'm not asking you to choose comfort over the ranch. I'm telling you that Hector has given 15 years to Cole Ranch, and he is sleeping under a roof that is going to drop water on his head, and then drop something heavier, and that matters." Nathan looked at her. "I'll move it up," he said. "Thank you," she said, and left. He sat there for a moment. He moved it up. Later that evening, Hector found Nathan in the barn and said, "I heard you're moving the bunkhouse repair up." "That's right," Nathan said. Hector was quiet for a moment. "She talked to you about it." "She brought it to my attention, yes." Another pause. "Nobody's done that before," Hector said. "Gone to bat like that, for the hands." "I know." Hector rubbed the back of his neck. "I just want to say, Hector, I know, not my business." "Correct." Hector went back to the bunkhouse. Nathan went on checking tack in the barn, and he thought about what it meant that no one had done that before. And he thought about why no one had done it before, because it required both the access to his office and the willingness to use it, and the first without the second was useless. And Amelia Hart had walked in there and said what needed saying, without drama and without apology. I thought about that for a long time. The twist when it came from outside the ranch entirely. It was a Thursday 5 weeks after Amelia had turned the wagon around. Nathan came in from town with the mail sorted through it at his desk and found a letter addressed not to him, but to Miss Amelia Hart, Cole Ranch, Montana Territory. The return address was Columbus, Ohio, a law office. He brought it to her in the kitchen without comment. She looked at the return address. Her face did something quick and controlled that he caught only because he had been paying close attention to her face for 5 weeks without admitting that was what he was doing. "Thank you," she said, and set it on the counter and went back to what she was doing. He went to his office. 20 minutes later, he heard her footsteps cross the kitchen floor, go to the back door, go out. He waited. The footsteps did not come back. After another 10 minutes, he got up. She was on the back porch, sitting on the single wooden chair there. The letter open in her lap and her hands folded over it. She was not crying. She was not visibly distressed. She was absolutely still in the way that Nathan recognized from the train platform the composure that cost something. He came to the door. She heard him. "I'm fine," she said. "I didn't ask." A beat. "The letter is from a solicitor in Columbus," she said, "regarding the estate of a Mr. Alton Price." Nathan waited. "He was the man I worked for," she said. "For 5 years. His household. His family." She looked down at the letter. "He died 2 months ago. Apparently he remembered me in his will. There is a sum of money." She stopped. "That's good news," Nathan said carefully. "It is." She folded the letter slowly. "It means I could go back east. I could go anywhere, really. I'm not without options anymore." The back porch was quiet. Nathan leaned against the doorframe. "Is that what you want?" he said. "To go back east?" She looked up at him. "No," she said. One word. No elaboration. Just the clean, honest fact of it sitting in the air between them. Nathan looked at the yard. At the mountains in the distance going purple in the late afternoon. At everything except the woman 5 feet away, who had just answered a question he was not ready to have asked. "All right," he said. "All right," she said. He went back inside. He stood in the kitchen for a long moment doing nothing. Then he went to his... She had money now. She had choices she didn't have before, and she had said no. He sat with that fact and let it be exactly what it was. That night at dinner, Clara noticed that neither Nathan nor Amelia said very much, but that the silence between them had a different quality than usual. Hector noticed it too. Both of them had the collective wisdom not to remark on it. After the dishes were done, and Hector had gone to the bunkhouse, and Clara had taken her book to the sitting room, Nathan and Amelia were alone in the kitchen. He was at the table with the stock records. She was at the counter finishing an account ledger. "The solicitor wants an answer by month's end," she said without looking up. "About what to do with the money. What are the options? I can have it sent by bank draft, or I can have him release it to a local bank." She turned a page. "If I had a local bank..." "Dawson's bank in town would handle it," Nathan said. "Tell him to use the Cole Ranch account as the reference for establishing credit. Martin Dawson knows me." She looked up then. Whatever she was thinking, she kept it private. "That's a significant thing to offer." "It's a practical solution to a practical problem," Nathan said. She held his gaze for a moment. "You are the most aggressively practical man I have ever met," she said. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is one," she said. "I like practical people. They mean what they do." He looked at his ledger. "Write to the solicitor," he said. "Use Dawson's bank. I'll speak to Martin tomorrow." She went back to her ledger. The lamp burned between them. After a while she said quietly, "I want to be clear about something." He waited. "The money changes my situation," she said. "But it doesn't change what I want. I'm not staying here because I have to. I wasn't staying before because I had to. Either, though I know it may have looked that way." Nathan set down his pen. "I know that," he said. "Do you?" He looked at her. Fully. Not the sideways glances he had been managing for 5 weeks, but a direct look, the kind he gave things that mattered. "Yes," he said. "I do." She nodded once. A small private thing. They went back to their work. The storm came on a Friday in late September, the first hard storm of the early fall, and it came without much warning, the way Montana weather often did, a front sweeping down from the north with a speed that outpaced even the experienced local forecasting. By mid-afternoon, the sky had gone the particular shade of green-gray that meant serious wind, and by 4 o'clock, Nathan had every available handout, securing the livestock and equipment. He sent Hector and the men to the barn and east sheds. He told Clara to stay inside. He spent an hour in the driving wind, checking the cattle in the near pasture, moving them to the shelter of the creekside tree line. And by the time he made it back to the house, he was soaked through, and the wind was strong enough to pull the door out of his hand. He got inside. The house was lit from within lamps in the kitchen in the sitting room. The kind of light that looked different when you came in from a storm. Nathan pulled off his wet coat in the entryway and heard voices. Clara was in the sitting room, and Amelia, and a voice he didn't recognize. He came to the doorway. Sitting at the sitting room table was a woman he had never seen before, mid-40s, travel-worn with the look of someone who had been on the road for days and had arrived here by what appeared to be desperate necessity. Beside her was a boy, maybe 7 years old, asleep against her shoulder. Amelia was pouring hot coffee at the table. Clara had a blanket. "Nathan," Clara said, seeing him. "This is Mrs. Ruth Calloway. She came to the door about an hour ago. She was on the road when the weather turned." Nathan looked at the woman. "You're welcome to stay until it passes," he said. "We have room." "Thank you," Ruth Calloway said. Her voice was frayed at the edges. "I'm sorry to impose. I didn't know how far the next house was." "You made the right call," Nathan said. Amelia caught his eye across the room just briefly, just a fraction of a second, and he read in it a kind of quiet gratitude that she didn't put into words. He had said the right thing, and she had noticed, and that was all it was. But it settled in his chest like it was more than that. Ruth Calloway ate and drank, and eventually fell asleep in the sitting room chair beside her son. Clara went to bed. Hector sent word from the bunkhouse that the hands were all secured. The storm hit its peak around 10 o'clock, and the house shook, and the windows worked, and the roof held. Nathan and Amelia sat at the kitchen table. Not working, just sitting with coffee, listening to the storm do its worst against the house. "She's running from something," Amelia said quietly. "I know," Nathan said. "She didn't say from what." "People don't usually, not the first night." Amelia wrapped both hands around her cup. "You've done this before, taken people in." "Ranches are supposed to," he said. "That's the old understanding. The range is hard and people get into trouble. You take them in." She looked at him. "Clara told me about the family from the reservation 3 winters ago. You fed them for 2 weeks and sent them south with winter supplies." Nathan shook his head. "Clara talks too much." "She talks exactly the right amount," Amelia said. "She loves you. That's what it sounds like." The storm shook the west wall, and both of them looked up automatically, then looked back down. "Can I ask you something?" Amelia said. "Go ahead." "The room upstairs," she said. "The locked one." She paused. "You touched the handle once. I saw you through the crack in my door. I wasn't watching, I just happened to see." Nathan was very still. "I'm not asking you to open it," she said quickly. "I'm not asking anything about it. I just want to say—" She stopped. Tried again. "I lost my brother 3 years ago. After that, I kept his letters in a box that I couldn't open and couldn't throw away. For almost a year it sat on my dresser, and I walked past it every day, and it held me in place, like I owed the grief something, like letting go meant losing him a second time." The storm outside, the lamp between them. "What changed?" Nathan said. "I opened the box," she said. "One morning just I opened it, and I read every letter, and I cried until I couldn't anymore. And afterward," she looked at her hands, "afterward, I could remember him without the grief being the first thing I felt. The love could come first again. The grief was still there, but love was bigger." Nathan looked at the lamp flame. "She would have hated what I've done to the garden," he said. It was the first direct thing he had said about Margaret in years. Not to Clara, who would have made it into something. Not to Hector, who would have been kind in a way that would have made it worse. Just here in the kitchen in the storm, to the woman across the table who understood exactly what she was being given and was not going to misuse it. "I know," Amelia said. "You know it too. I think I've known it for a long time, he said, and used the knowing it as another reason not to do anything. She didn't say anything to that. She just let it sit. The storm gave the house one more serious shake and then began slowly to ease. She sounds like she was remarkable, Amelia said after a while. She was, Nathan said. She was the kind of person who made everything around her more alive. A pause. I think I've been punishing the world for losing her, keeping things dead because she was. He looked up. That's an ugly thing to admit. It's an honest thing, Amelia said. There's a difference. He heard his own words from the first morning come back to him, and something moved through his face. You remembered that, he said. I remember most things, she said, especially things that are true. They sat in the kitchen while the storm softened to rain and the house settled back into itself, and Nathan Cole talked about Margaret for the first time in 7 years. Not everything. Not all of it. Not the parts he was not yet ready to carry in front of another person. But enough. The way she laughed. The way she had named all the horses. The way she had planted that garden in the first spring they were married, working from dawn to nearly dark, coming in covered in good Montana earth, prouder of a row of seedlings than most people were of finished work. Amelia listened without interrupting, without offering sympathy at every turn, without making it smaller by trying to fix it. She just listened the way she did everything with her whole attention. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet and the rain was soft against the roof, and somewhere in the sitting room, Ruth Calloway's son made a small sleeping sound. Thank you, Nathan said. She shook her head. You did the hard part. You made it possible, he said. That counts. She looked at her coffee cup. A long, private look. When she looked up again, her eyes were bright but controlled. I should go to bed, she said. Yes, he said. She stood. She carried her cup to the counter. She turned. Nathan, she said. He looked up. It was the first time she had used his given name. Neither of them mentioned it. Both of them registered it. That garden, she said. When you're ready, not before, but when you're ready, I'd like to help you bring it back. The way it was. The way she meant it to be. He sat at the table in the kitchen of his own house, in a storm that was passing, and felt something unlock in his chest that had been sealed so long he had forgotten it was a door. All right, he said. She went upstairs. He sat alone at the table for a while longer, in the good kind of silence, and did not fight what he was feeling. He just let it be there. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough. Ruth Calloway stayed 3 days. By the second morning, Nathan had the shape of her situation without having to ask for it directly. A husband in Billings who drank and whose drinking had recently crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. A brother in Oregon who had written twice offering her a place to land. The road she had been on when the storm found her was the road going west, and the boy sleeping against her shoulder was named Thomas, and Thomas was 6 years old, and had his mother's eyes and his father's stubbornness, which Ruth said with a tired love that told Nathan everything about what she was leaving and what she was carrying. He did not offer opinions on the husband. He gave her the room, the meals, and a letter of introduction addressed to the stage line in the next county that would cut her ticket cost by half. It was the kind of thing his father had done, and his father's father before him. The old range hospitality that cost something and mattered because it cost something. On the third morning, when Ruth Calloway shook his hand at the door and thanked him with the direct eyes of someone who had been helped without being diminished, Nathan nodded and said, "Safe travels," and watched her go. He turned back into the house and found Amelia standing in the kitchen doorway with coffee and an expression that held something he had been seeing more of in recent weeks, a quiet warmth she no longer worked to conceal. "You didn't ask her anything," Amelia said. "Wasn't my business to ask. You just helped. That's what the situation needed." He took the coffee from her. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "Like what?" "Like I did something unusual." She turned back to the kitchen. "Because most men would have asked," she said over her shoulder. "Would have made her explain herself before they decided she deserved help." A pause. "You didn't make her earn it." Nathan drank his coffee. I thought about what she'd said for the rest of the morning. October arrived and brought with it the particular quality of Montana fall cold mornings. Brilliant afternoons, the sense of something enormous and beautiful running out of time. The cattle operation moved into its pre-winter rhythm, which meant longer days for Nathan and the hands, and a pressure that settled across the ranch like a second weather system. Hector ran the outside work with his usual competence. Nathan handled the supply contracts, the livestock decisions, the bank negotiations that were always more complicated in October than any other month. And Amelia managed everything else. Nathan understood now what he had not understood when he first offered her the position that household management on a working ranch of this size was not a small job dressed up in domestic language. It was logistics, supply chain, personnel management, financial accounting, and crisis response all running simultaneously at all times. She handled it with an ease that looked effortless and was not. He knew it was not because he had tried to do pieces of it himself badly for 7 years. She never complained. She never overstated the work. She just did it, and the ranch ran better, and Nathan noticed that the hands were steadier, and the meals were regular, and the accounts were clean, and the supply shortfalls that had plagued the operation for years had quietly stopped happening. One evening in mid-October, he came into the kitchen late after a long day, dealing with a contract dispute with a neighboring rancher named Aldous Pratt, a dispute over grazing boundaries that had been simmering for 2 years and had reached the point where lawyers were being mentioned. He was tired in the particular way that came from a day of controlled anger, and he came through the door and sat at the table and pressed his hands flat on the surface and breathed. Amelia was at the counter. She did not ask him what happened. She put a plate in front of him and sat down across from him with her account ledger. He ate. After a few minutes he said, "Pratt is trying to claim the east quarter of the ridge pasture, 17 acres. She looked up from the ledger. "The boundary line runs along the creek," he said. "Has run there since my father filed the original deed in 1861. Pratt knows this. He's been chipping at it for 6 years, and now he thinks he has a surveyor willing to say what Pratt's money wants him to say." "Do you have the original survey documents?" "I have my father's copy. I don't know the current state of the county records." She set her pen down. "The county assessor's office in Helena would have the filed copies," she said. "They'd have everything recorded from the territorial filing period. If the original survey is in the county record, a bought surveyor's opinion means nothing against it." Nathan looked at her. "How do you know that?" "My father was a school teacher," she said. "But before that he studied law for 2 years before his family ran out of money. He talked about property law the way other fathers talked about weather. I absorbed more of it than I realized." She paused. "You should write to Helena this week, before Pratt files anything officially." "I'll do it tomorrow." "Tonight," she said. "Give it to Hector to ride into town with at first light. The mail goes out Thursday." He looked at her for a moment. "Tonight," he agreed. She pushed her account ledger aside and pulled a fresh piece of paper from the stack on the counter and set it in front of him with his pen. He wrote the letter to Helena while she sat across from him and went back to the accounts, and the kitchen lamp burned between them, and it was the most natural thing in the world. 2 people working side by side in the evening, and Nathan registered that naturalness as both a comfort and a danger, and decided for the first time not to run from it. He blotted the letter and folded it. "Amelia," he said. She looked up. He held the letter for a moment. "Thank you," he said. "Not for this specifically. For—" He stopped. He was not a man who said this kind of thing easily, and he knew he was not going to say it perfectly, so he was going to say it plainly. "For staying. When you didn't have to. When you had other options." She was very still. "I stayed because I wanted to," she said. "I told you that. I know. But I wanted to say that it matters. That it matters to me." He set the letter on the table. "I've been a difficult situation to walk into. I know that. You walked into it without complaint and made it better. You walked out on that road to stop a wagon," she said quietly. "Don't understate what you did either." The lamp flame moved. The kitchen held them both for a moment in its warm circle. "I should finish these accounts," she said. "Yes," he said. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then she looked down at the ledger, and he looked at the letter, and they went back to their work. And that was how October moved. The letter to Helena bore results within 2 weeks faster than Nathan had expected, which told him the county assessor's office was either unusually efficient or the matter had already been inquired about from another direction. The response confirmed what Nathan knew. The Cole Ranch eastern boundary had been surveyed and recorded in 1861, filed in the territorial records, and the creek line was unambiguous. Furthermore, and this was the part that made Nathan go very still when he read it, the assessor's letter noted that a survey inquiry had been filed by an A. Pratt of the Pratt Cattle Company 3 months earlier, but the county had declined to authorize a resurvey, given the clarity of the existing records. Pratt had already tried. He had already tried and been turned down, and had not mentioned it during their recent confrontation, which meant the confrontation had been a bluff pressure applied in the hope that Nathan didn't know what the county already did. Nathan went to find Amelia. She was in the sitting room, working on a piece of mending for the hands. She looked up when he came in. He handed her the letter without a word. She read it. When she finished, she looked up at him. He already knew he'd lost, she said. He already knew, Nathan said. He was counting on me not knowing. What will you do? Nothing, Nathan said. I'll do nothing. I know he knows I know, and we both know the county record isn't going to change. The dispute is over. He took the letter back. You told me to write to Helena tonight instead of tomorrow. If I'd waited until tomorrow, Hector wouldn't have ridden until Thursday, the letter would have gone out Friday, and we'd still be waiting. She went back to her mending. It was the obvious thing to do. It wasn't obvious to me. I was angry. When I'm angry, I make decisions too slowly. She glanced up. I know. I've noticed. He raised an eyebrow. You also make decisions too slowly when you're being careful about something you care about, she said, looking back at the mending. The anger slowness and the care slowness look the same from the outside, but they're different. I can usually tell which one it is. He stood in the doorway of the sitting room. How? He said. Your jaw, she said. When you're angry, your jaw is tight. When you're being careful about something that matters to you, you breathe differently. He stared at her. She kept mending. You have been paying a great deal of attention, he said. I pay attention to most things, she said. It's how I've managed to be useful to people who didn't bother to explain things to me. She bit off a thread. It's also how I stay safe. Old habit. He heard the last 2 words and let them sit for a moment. Nobody here is going to hurt you, he said. She looked up then. The look on her face was complicated and honest. I know that, she said. I do know that. But knowing something and unknowing a habit are 2 different timelines. She paused. You know that better than most people. He did. He went back to his office. He sat at his desk, and he thought about what she had just told him. That she watched him the way she watched everything carefully, because carefulness had been her survival for years. He thought about what it cost a person to live that way. He thought about whether she felt safe enough here to someday stop. He wanted her to stop. He realized that with a clarity that arrived without warning. I wanted her to stop watching everything with that braced attention. He wanted her to be in a place where she didn't have to. He sat with that for a long time. November came in cold and hard. The first real test of the winter prep work came in the 2nd week, when a cold front settled over the territory, and the temperatures dropped fast enough to catch 2 of the younger hands unprepared in the east pasture. Nobody was seriously hurt. Nathan and Hector got to them inside 30 minutes, but the incident shook the ranch in the way close calls always do, leaving behind a residue of what if that lasted for days. Amelia had hot water and dry blankets ready when they brought the men in. She had already, Nathan did not know how she had known to do this before anyone told her, already put the spare room by the kitchen into order as a place for them to recover. She moved through the crisis with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything. And when it was over, and both men were warm and drinking broth, and embarrassed about the whole thing, she was already back at the kitchen counter making supper, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Nathan watched her from the doorway. He had been watching her from doorways for 4 months. He was done pretending he didn't know why. That evening after supper, Clara appeared at his office door. I need to talk to you, she said. About what? She came in and sat down across from his desk, which she rarely did. Clara preferred to have difficult conversations on the move, and folded her hands in her lap with the posture of someone who has prepared what they are going to say. I'm going to visit the Harmons in spring, she said. Eleanor Harmon has asked me to come for the whole season, April through June. Nathan looked at her. That's 3 months. I know. You've never been away from the ranch for 3 months. I know that too. She met his eyes. The ranch will be fine without me. Hector runs the outside. Amelia runs the inside. A pause. You won't be alone. He understood then what this conversation was actually about. Clara, I'm not doing anything, she said. I'm telling you I'm going to visit Eleanor Harmon in the spring because Eleanor Harmon is my oldest friend and I haven't seen her in 4 years. She paused. But I'm also telling you that I have watched you for 4 months and I know what I see. And I think you know what I see. And I think you need to stop waiting. Waiting for what? He said, though he knew. For permission, Clara said. For some kind of signal that it's allowed. That it doesn't mean forgetting Margaret. That it doesn't mean... She stopped. Her voice had gone soft. Nathan, she loved you so much. Margaret loved you so much that if she could have left you a note, it would have said, don't do this to yourself. She would not want this. The office was very quiet. I know that, Nathan said. Then stop acting like she would. He looked at his desk. Clara stood up. That's all I wanted to say. She went to the door, stopped. She's a good person. She's exactly the right kind of person, actually. Not because she's easy, but because she's real. And you're real. And 2 real people are something. She paused. Don't wait until something forces your hand. Do it because you want to. She left. Nathan sat alone in his office for a long time. I was still sitting there when he heard the kitchen lamp go out and Amelia's footsteps cross the floor and start up the stairs. He heard her stop at the landing the way she sometimes did, and then continue, and then her door close at the end of the hall. He got up. He walked to the hallway. He looked up the stairs. He did not go up, but he stood at the bottom of them for a long time in the dark house, listening to the winter outside, and made himself be honest about something he had been managing for months. He was in love with her. Not falling into it already, there had been there for weeks, had been building since the first morning she had coffee on the stove before he came down. He was in love with Amelia Hart, and she was on the other side of a door at the end of his hall, and he was standing at the bottom of the stairs like a man waiting for something to tell him what to do. Nothing was going to tell him. He had to decide. He went to bed. He did not sleep. The next morning he was downstairs before she was. For the first time since she had arrived, he had the coffee on the stove before her. He heard her footstep stop at the top of the stairs when she smelled it, just a brief pause and then come down. She came into the kitchen and saw him at the stove. Something moved across her face. Surprise. Something warmer than surprise. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know, he said. He poured her coffee and set it on the table and sat down across from where she usually sat. She sat down. They looked at each other across the kitchen table in the early morning light. I need to tell you something, he said. And I want to tell it to you plainly, because that's the only way I know how to say important things. She set her cup down. Her hands were still. I'm not good at this, he said. I should say that first. I have not. I have spent a long time making sure I didn't have to be, because being good at it requires practice, and I decided I was done practicing. He stopped, steadied. But you should know. You deserve to know. What you've done here, the way you've been here, it has changed something. For me. Not something small. Amelia was very still across the table. I'm not asking you for anything right now, he said. I don't think this is the moment to ask anything. I wanted you to know, because you've been honest with me every time it cost you something and you deserve the same back. The kitchen was quiet for a long moment. Nathan, she said. He looked at her. I know, she said. Simply. Quietly. I've known for a while. He absorbed that. Why didn't you say anything? He said. Because it was yours to say, she said. Some things a person has to arrive at in their own time. Pushing doesn't help. A pause. And because I needed to be sure it wasn't gratitude, or loneliness, or the ranch needing something that I happened to be able to provide. It's not any of those things, he said. I know that now, she said. I couldn't be sure of it 3 months ago. He looked at her. And now? She picked up her coffee cup, looked at him over the rim. Now I'm sure, she said. He breathed out. They sat in the kitchen in the early morning with their coffee and the winter light coming through the window, and nothing dramatic happened. No declarations, no grand gestures, just two people sitting across a table from each other, knowing what they knew, letting it be real between them without needing to rush it into a shape it wasn't ready for. After a while, Hector came in from outside and stopped dead in the doorway because the kitchen felt different, and he couldn't immediately identify why, and his face did several things in rapid succession. Coffee's on, Amelia said without looking at him. Right, Hector said. He poured his coffee. He sat at the far end of the table. He said nothing, which remained the single most remarkable thing Hector Vega was capable of. Nathan looked at Amelia. She was looking at her cup, but the corner of her mouth had done the thing that it did, and Nathan Cole, for the first time in 7 years, felt something he had been certain was gone. He felt like himself. Not the self that had survived. The self that had existed before survival became the whole point. The man his father had raised, the man Margaret had loved, the man who had once believed that a life fully lived was worth the risk of losing it. That man was still here. He had just needed someone patient enough to wait him out. He drank his coffee. Outside, winter held the ranch in its cold grip. Inside, the kitchen was warm. The accounts were straight. The bunkhouse roof had been repaired. The garden along the south wall was dormant now under the frost, waiting the way. Good things wait, not gone, just resting ready for whatever spring decided to bring. And at the kitchen table, two people who had each lost too much and rebuilt themselves from the pieces drank their morning coffee in the particular piece of something that had finally, after a long and careful time, become what it was always going to be. Neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to. December came to the Montana Territory, the way it always did, without apology and without restraint. The cold settled into the bones of the land and the bones of the people living on it, and Cole Ranch moved into its winter rhythms with the practiced efficiency of an operation that had survived many winters and intended to survive many more. But this winter was different from the 7 that had come before it. Nathan Cole knew it the first morning he came downstairs and did not brace himself against the silence. The kitchen was warm. Coffee was on. Amelia was at the table with the account ledger and a cup of tea, and she looked up when he came in and said good morning, and he said good morning back, and nothing about it was formal anymore. It was just theirs. The morning was theirs. That was new, and it was large, and he carried it carefully the way you carry something you don't want to drop. They had not made announcements. They had not sat Clara down and explained themselves. There was nothing to explain yet. No promises made, no future mapped. What existed between them was still finding its shape, the way water finds the shape of whatever holds it. But the ranch knew. Ranches always know. Hector knew from the morning Nathan had the coffee on first. Clara knew from the morning after that when she came downstairs and found them both already at the table talking, and the talking stopped when she entered the room, not from guilt, but from the natural privacy of a conversation between two people who have claimed each other. Clara said nothing. Clara made her coffee and sat at the end of the table and smiled into her cup with the controlled triumph of a woman who had been right about something significant and was going to let that be enough. It almost was. The first test of the new shape of things came from outside the ranch, as the real tests usually did. Aldous Pratt had not forgotten the boundary dispute. A man like Pratt did not forget things that had cost him, and the county's refusal to authorize his surveyor had cost him the thing he most disliked losing, which was not the land itself, but the sense that he could take what he wanted from whoever held it. He was a man who had built his operation through pressure and implication, and Nathan Cole had lived next to him for 6 years without being pressured, which Pratt had always taken as a personal failing. In December, Pratt found a different lever, He came to town on a Thursday, which was the day the Territorial Bank processed its ranching accounts. Nathan heard about it from Martin Dawson at the bank. Pratt had been in, had asked about the Cole Ranch's credit standing, had asked specifically whether the operation was carrying any significant debt going into winter. Dawson, who was both a professional and a man who understood the difference between inquiry and maneuvering, had told Pratt nothing. But he told Nathan everything over coffee, in the careful way of a banker who believes his clients should know what is being asked about them. Nathan came back to the ranch that afternoon with his jaw tight. Amelia saw it before he said a word. She was in the kitchen when he came in, and she looked at his face and set down her pen. "Pratt," she said. Not a question. He told her what Dawson had said. She listened without interrupting. "He's looking for weakness," she said when he finished. "He can't take the land, so he's looking for a financial pressure point." "I know what he's doing." "Are there any," she said, "pressure points, honestly?" He sat down. He ran his hand across the back of his neck. "The winter feed contract is extended. I'm carrying it until March when the payment comes in from the cattle sale. It's not a problem for the operation. It's normal winter cash flow. But on paper, if someone looked at the balance in December and didn't understand the cycle, it could look like distress," she said. "It could." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "How much is the extension?" He told her the number. She picked up her pen. She opened the account ledger. She ran her finger down several columns, and then she stopped and looked up. "The inheritance from the Price estate," she said. "The sum I had sent to Dawson's bank. It's sitting in a holding account." Nathan went very still. "Amelia, it would cover the extension entirely," she said. "If it were deposited against the operations account, the December balance would show no debt. There is nothing for Pratt to point at." "That's your money," Nathan said. "From 6 years of work. I'm not taking your savings to solve a problem I can manage on my own." "I know you can manage it," she said. "That's not the point." She looked at him steadily. "The point is that we are—" She paused, selected the word carefully. "The point is that this ranch is not just yours to protect anymore, and that money is not doing anything sitting in a holding account. It should be doing something." Another pause. "Let it do something." The kitchen held them both. "It would be a loan," he said finally. "At standard rate. Written down, witnessed, legal. That's unnecessary." "It's necessary to me," he said. "I won't take what I haven't earned. Not from you, not from anyone." She looked at him for a long moment. "All right," she said. "A loan. Written down. Witnessed by Hector, who will be insufferably pleased about being asked." Something moved through Nathan's face. "Yes," he said. "He will." She wrote the terms out that evening at the kitchen table in her clear, careful hand, and Nathan read them and signed, and Hector witnessed it with a signature so elaborate. It took 30 seconds, and Hector's face held the exact expression of a man who understands he is being trusted with something important and intends to be worthy of that trust for the rest of his natural life. The next morning, Nathan went to Dawson's bank. When Pratt came back to town 2 weeks later with a new angle and a banker from Billings, he had apparently convinced to assess the Cole Ranch situation. Dawson was able to tell them both in the polite and immovable way of a banker holding clean numbers that the Cole Ranch account was fully solvent with no outstanding extensions. The Billings banker looked at the numbers, shrugged, and went back to Billings. Pratt left without speaking to anyone. Nathan heard about it from Dawson again. He came home and told Amelia. She was mending something at the kitchen counter, and she did not look up immediately, and when she did, her face was composed and calm. "Good," she said. "That's all you have to say." "I have many things to say," she said. "Good covers the most important one." He laughed. It was the first time she had heard him laugh, a real laugh, not the controlled exhale he sometimes produced when Hector said something worth acknowledging. This was a real one, low and sudden, and it lasted only a moment, but it lit up his face in a way that made her set down the mending and look at him fully. He caught her looking. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said. She picked the mending back up. "I've just never heard that before." The laugh. The laugh. Howe was quiet for a moment. "It's been a while," he said. "I know," she said. "It suits you." He went to pour coffee, and she went back to the mending, and the kitchen was warm, and the winter pressed against the windows, and inside the warmth held. January brought Clara back from the Harmon visit she had moved up from spring, because Clara had heard about the Pratt situation from Hector's letter, and had decided that whatever she'd told herself about giving Nathan and Amelia space, the Pratt situation meant she was coming home. She arrived on a Tuesday, came through the door with her bags, and her opinions assessed the kitchen in one long experienced glance, and announced, "You two look different." "We're the same as we were," Nathan said from behind the ranch ledger. "You're really not," Clara said. She kissed his cheek. She went to find Amelia. Nathan listened to the sounds of his sister and Amelia in conversation in the next room, the back and forth of two women who had moved past the careful politeness of early acquaintance into the unself-conscious rhythm of genuine familiarity. And he sat at his desk and felt the house around him the way he sometimes felt it now, not as a structure he maintained, but as a place that was alive. He had not felt that since 1879. He let himself feel it now without pulling back from it. That was new. That was the real change. Change, not the feelings themselves, but his willingness to stand in them without bracing for the floor to drop. The second real test came in February, and it came from a direction Nathan had not anticipated. A letter arrived from Columbus, Ohio. Not from the Price solicitor that matter was closed. This letter was from a woman named Dorothea Lamb, who identified herself as the wife of a cousin of Amelia's late mother. Nathan did not read it. It was addressed to Amelia, and he gave it to her. Unopened, but he was in the kitchen when she read it, and he watched her face go through something that started controlled and ended somewhere more complicated. She set the letter on the table. "She wants me to come back to Ohio," Amelia said. Nathan said nothing. "Apparently there is a situation with the family. A property in probate. She believes I may have a legal interest in it as the last surviving member of my mother's line." She looked at the letter. "She wants me to come and discuss it with a solicitor in Columbus." "Do you believe her?" Nathan said. A pause. "I believe there's probably a property. I don't know what the interest is or whether it amounts to anything real." She folded the letter slowly. "She was never kind to my mother when my mother was alive. I don't know why she would be writing to me now unless there was something she wanted." "Then what does she want?" Amelia was quiet for a long moment. "I think she wants a signature," she said. "Or the absence of one, depending on what the property is worth and how the inheritance law reads my consent or contest could affect the distribution." She set the letter on the table. "She's not asking me back out of family feeling." "Will you go?" Nathan said. She looked at him. "Do you want me to?" she said. "That's not the right question," he said. "What do you want to do?" She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything that mattered. "I want to know what I'm owed," she said finally. "Not because I need the money, but because for my entire adult life, people have taken from me and given nothing back and told me to be grateful for the opportunity to keep giving." She looked at the letter. "If there is something of my mother's family that belongs to me, I want to know it. I want to stand in front of a solicitor and hear it said plainly." "Then go," Nathan said. She looked up. "I'll take you to the stage in town," he said. "Write to the solicitor. Find out what the situation actually is. If she's trying to buy you off for cheap, you'll know it. If there's something real owed to you, you'll know that too." He paused. "Either way you'll know, and knowing is better than wondering." "I could be gone for 3 weeks," she said. "Maybe more." "The ranch will manage," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "You're telling me to go," she said. "You're not." She stopped. "What?" he said. "I expected you to say it wasn't necessary," she said. "Or that the ranch needed Amelia." He said it with the particular quietness that he brought to things he meant completely. "Go. Find out what's yours. Come back." Her eyes went bright, just briefly. She controlled it. "Come back," she repeated. "That last part," he said, "is the only part I care about. She left on a Wednesday 3 days later with a bag and a letter to the Columbus solicitor and Nathan's handshake at the stage platform that lasted a moment longer than a handshake between an employer and a household manager would last. And Hector, who had driven them to town, studied the horses with an intensity they did not warrant. She was gone for 4 weeks. Those 4 weeks were the clearest evidence Nathan had yet encountered of what his life had become. Not because the ranch fell apart, it didn't. Hector ran the outside with his usual competence. Clara managed the kitchen and the household accounts, grumbling productively, doing it well. Everything functioned. But Nathan moved through the functioning house like a man who had misplaced something and couldn't stop checking the place where it was supposed to be. He came downstairs in the mornings, and the coffee was there because Clara made it, and it was fine, and it was not the same. He sat at dinner with Hector and Clara, and the conversation was good because Hector and Clara were good company, and it was not the same. He did the evening accounts at his desk alone, and the quiet was the old quiet, the 7 years quiet, and he did not want it. Clara watched him. She waited until the second week before she said anything because she understood that there was a kind of dignity in letting a man arrive at his own conclusions, and she had made enough moves on this board already. "You should write to her," Clara said on a Thursday evening. "She's in Columbus handling a legal matter," Nathan said. "I know where she is," Clara said. "Write to her." He looked at his sister across the dinner table. "Clara, you are miserable," she said, not unkindly. "You were miserable for 7 years, and I watched it happen so slowly that I almost got used to it. For 4 months, you were not miserable, and now she's been gone 2 weeks, and you are miserable again, and the difference between those two states is her." She paused. "Write to her." He wrote to her that night. Howe was not a man who wrote easily about things that mattered. He had demonstrated this to himself by filling half a page with practical ranch updates before he stopped, put the pen down, and looked at what he had written. He started again. What he wrote in the second attempt was shorter and cost him more. He wrote that the ranch was well. He wrote that Hector had been insufferable in her absence. He wrote that Clara was managing the accounts with considerably more complaint than Amelia brought to the task. He wrote that the mornings were wrong in a way he did not know how to describe precisely. He wrote, "I understand now what you meant about the letters in the box. I kept thinking that loving you would mean I had to stop loving her. I know now that's not how it works. I know because I can think of Margaret and feel the grief and the love in the right order, the way you said love first, grief after, and at the same time without any contradiction. Think of you and feel something that has its own name and doesn't borrow anything from the past." He stopped. He read what he had written. He folded it and sealed it before he could change his mind and sent it with the next morning's post. Her reply came 8 days later, which was the fastest. The mail between Montana and Ohio could possibly move, and told him she had written back the same day she received it. Her letter was 3 pages. He read it at his desk with the door closed. What she wrote was this. The Columbus situation had resolved in a way that surprised her. A small house on the east side of the city that had belonged to her maternal grandmother had been held in a complicated probate for years, and Dorothea Lamb had indeed hoped that Amelia would sign away her interest cheaply. She had not. The solicitor, a young man with the honest face and stubborn precision of someone who had chosen the law because he believed it should mean something, had walked her through her rights with meticulous clarity, and at the end of it, Amelia Hart was the legal owner of a small house in Columbus, Ohio. She did not want the house. She wanted to sell it. She wanted to take the money from the sale and come back to Montana and invest it in something that belonged to her future rather than her past. She wanted, and this was the part Nathan read 3 times, she wanted to talk to Nathan about whether Cole Ranch might have used for a small textile operation. She had been thinking for months about the families in the surrounding county who had no access to quality cloth and thread and basic sewing goods. She had been thinking about what it would mean to establish a small supply point for those materials at the ranch. Something she could run, something that served the community around them, and built something that was genuinely hers. And she wrote at the end of the 3 pages, in the same clear hand that kept his accounts and wrote his letter to Helena, and had addressed herself to every hard thing she had ever faced. I have been thinking about what you wrote. About the grief and the love being in the right order. I know the same thing from the other direction. I know what it is to be afraid that wanting something good means you'll lose it. I have been afraid of that my whole life. I am less afraid now than I have ever been. I think that's because of you. Come and meet me at the stage when I arrive. I'll be on the Thursday coach." I was at the stage platform 40 minutes early. Hector drove him to town and did not say a word the entire way, which was Nathan had come to understand Hector's highest form of respect. The stage came in on time. She stepped down before it had fully stopped, the way she had stepped off the train 6 months ago without waiting for help carrying her bag, looking forward instead of back. She saw him. He was standing at the edge of the platform with his hat in his hands, which she had once noticed he only did when something mattered to him. She walked to him. She stopped 2 feet away. They looked at each other in the thin February light, with the coach horses blowing steam and Hector studying the sky above the depot with professional focus. "The ranch," she said. "Is it all right?" "It's fine," he said. "Clara is furious about the accounts." "I'll fix them tomorrow." "Yes," he said. "You will." A beat. "Nathan," she said. "Amelia," he said. He reached out and took her bag from her hand. Not because she couldn't carry it, because he wanted to. Because there were things a person did not, because they were necessary, but because they meant something, and she understood that, and he knew she understood it. "Let's go home," he said. She fell into step beside him. "Yes," she said. "Let's." Spring came to Cole Ranch with the particular ferocity of a Montana spring, all mud and cold mornings and sudden warm afternoons that made the cattle restless and the horses ambitious, and the ranch hands feel that winter had been a bad dream they were finally waking from. Clara left in April for the Harmon visit. She had been promising herself leaving with her bags and a long list of instructions nobody had asked for, and a fierce embrace for Amelia that lasted considerably longer than her embrace for Nathan, which Nathan bore with dignity. The garden came back. It did not come back all at once. It came back the way things come back after a long winter, tentatively first. Then with increasing conviction. Then with the full energy of something that had been waiting for exactly this. Nathan and Amelia worked on it on the weekend mornings side by side, and Nathan did the things he had not been able to do for 7 years. He pulled the dead growth, he turned the soil, he put his hands into the earth of a garden his wife had loved and felt for the first time. Not grief, first, but gratitude. Gratitude that it had existed. Gratitude that it could exist again. Amelia brought seeds she had ordered from the east. Roses for the south, edged the same variety Margaret had planted, because when Nathan had described them to her, she had found them in a catalog and ordered them without telling him. And when he saw the seed packets on the kitchen counter, he had gone very still for a moment, and then said quietly, "Thank you." And she had said, she knew what she was doing, we should trust her. The textile supply operation launched in May. It was small, a section of the equipment shed converted, and properly arranged, a standing order, with 2 suppliers in Helena, a notice placed in the county paper. Within 3 weeks, Amelia had customers. Within 6 weeks, she had more customers than she had anticipated, and was writing a letter to a 3rd supplier. Within the summer, women from 3 surrounding counties were making the trip to Cole Ranch for cloth and thread and sewing notions, and staying to talk the way people stay when they feel welcome. And the ranch acquired a quality it had not had in Nathan's memory. It became a place people came to voluntarily, not just to do business. Nathan watched this happen from a respectful distance, and with a pride he did not have adequate words for. Hector built her a proper sign for the shed entrance. He painted it himself in careful letters, Hart's Dry Goods and Sundries. It was not a perfect sign. Hector was a better ranch hand than he was a painter. But it went up on a Saturday in June, with the whole ranch gathered to watch, and Amelia stood in front of it, with her hands clasped in front of her, and her face doing something Nathan had only begun to see in recent months. The expression of a person who has come finally to a place that belongs to them. He stood beside her. "How does it feel?" he said. She looked at the sign. "Like mine," she said. "It is yours," he said. She looked at him. "So is this," she said, and she was not talking about the shed. He took her hand. Neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to. The question came on a Sunday evening in late June, sitting on the front porch with the summer settling around them, and the ranch breathing in the good way it breathed when the work of the day was done, and the work of tomorrow had not yet begun. Nathan had been thinking about how to say it for weeks, and in the end, he said it the only way he knew how to say anything that mattered, plainly, directly, without decoration. "I want to ask you to marry me," he said. "Not because the ranch needs anything, or because I'm looking for someone to fill a place that's been empty, but because I want to build the rest of my life with you in it. Because you are the most honest and the most capable and the most completely real person I have met in a long time, and I want to know that you're going to be here. Not as a household manager, not as the woman who happened to arrive on my platform, as mine, and I want to be yours." Amelia sat very still. Then she turned to look at him. "You practiced that," she said. "Multiple times," he said. "I could tell," she said. "It was very good." "Amelia." "Yes," she said. "Nathan." "The answer is yes." He breathed out. She leaned against his shoulder, and he put his arm around her, and they sat together on the porch of Cole Ranch in the summer evening, and watched the light go out of the Montana sky, the slow, lavish way it did in June. Color piled on color, all that beauty, spending itself over the land without holding anything back. Hector came around the side of the house half an hour later on his way from the barn and stopped dead when he saw them. "Well," he said. "Not a word," Nathan said. "I'm not saying anything," Hector said, grinning completely. "I'm just not saying anything very loudly." He went to the bunkhouse. They were married in August in the yard of Cole Ranch, with Clara crying openly, and Hector standing up with Nathan and Mrs. Dawson from town, presiding in the absence of the traveling minister, who had been delayed by weather, and whose delay nobody minded, because Mrs. Dawson turned out to be more eloquent than anyone expected. The people of the county came. Neighbors' ranch families, the women who had become Amelia's customers, and then her friends. Ruth Calloway came from Oregon with her son Thomas, who had grown 4 inches and had learned to ride, and presented himself to Nathan with the solemn dignity of a 7-year-old, who understood that some occasions required your best behavior. Nathan shook Thomas's hand seriously. Thomas was satisfied. The garden was in full bloom. Roses along the south edge, exactly where Margaret had planted them, full and red and extravagant in the August heat. The room upstairs was no longer locked. Nathan had opened it one morning in the spring with Amelia standing in the hallway behind him, and had gone inside and had stood in it for a long time, and when he came out, his eyes were red and his face was clear, and he said, "We can use this room." And they did. They made it what Margaret had always meant it to be, a room full of light and possibility, instead of a room full of stopped time. The woman who arrived crying on a dusty platform in the summer of 1886 became in the memory of everyone who knew Cole Ranch simply the woman who belonged there. Not because she had no choice, not because the ranch needed something she could provide, not because circumstances had arranged themselves in a particular way, and she had made the best of them, but because she had chosen it clearly and deliberately, with her eyes open and her heart full and her feet planted on the Montana ground like she had always known it was hers. And the cowboy who told her to get off his land on the day they met stood beside her in the August sun and understood, in the way that only comes to people who have survived the worst and come through the other side, that the life he had nearly refused was the only one worth having. They had not found a perfect life. They had done something harder and better. They had built one together on honest ground with honest hands, and it held the way things hold when they are made of the right materials, not because nothing could shake it, but because every time something tried, the two of them were standing in it together. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.